One of the biggest issues with small sensor camera photography, let's say like the Nikon P900, P950, P1000 cell phones, is the background blur. That's like the Achilles heel of these small sensor cameras that just sometimes doesn't give it a very professional look. And if we consider some of the larger sensor cameras, full frame, 600mm f4, those obviously are extremely expensive cameras and lenses, probably $12,000, $15,000. But it's kind of easy to spot, especially on bigger animals. Bigger animals, it's harder to get that background blur unless you're shooting f2, f4, or unless your background subject is, let's say, further away. So I want to show you how to do this. There's a free software called Gimp. I'll walk you through this, a really quick process on how to get some nice background blur. Here's an example. This is a photograph of a deer shot with an APS-C sensor, 200mm f6.3. And I'm going to go to the next one. I'll show you what I've done. The next photo, still sharp in the eyes, but the rest of the stuff is just got a softer tint to it. The body, the background blur is significantly more there. Kind of click back and forth. Yeah, you can see it. And then so for instance, this is a shot with the Sony 600mm f6.3, and it's got a fairly narrow depth of field is what we want, but not all sensor cameras, not all these cameras actually have the same look. This is an example where this is a photo of prairie chicken shot last year at P1000 f8, like 3,000mm, and you notice the shrubs or the grass in front is not all that out of focus, and then the background is. But what we can do is enhance this using Gimp and some of the radius blur and get that foreground a little bit more blurry, and then the background. If you notice how there's just a layer, a side layer across there that is actually in focus. Now this is an extreme example, but it's some of the things that we can do with Gimp, and I'll show you a couple other examples. This is a prairie dog shot, a photograph probably 5 years ago, and it's a P900. And if we look at the enhancement, foreground's blurred out, the background's a little bit more blurred out, and it looks, you know, you could kind of consider maybe it was done with the DSLR. It's got a little bit more pop. This is a photograph of, I'm going to say it was the Micro Four Thirds 800 400mm Panasonic 6.3. It's got some pretty good separation there. But if we really want to go the extra mile and make it a little over the top, we can enhance that a little bit. And if you notice now, it almost looks like a 600mm f4. It's got that really blurred foreground, background still a little bit blurry. Yeah, it looks fairly decent. Now this isn't something, we have to consider this, that most people that look at your photos, if you're really trying to get mass appeal, or that most people will not know you're doing this to the photograph. They just won't pick it up. It looks kind of natural if done correctly. The only people that are kind of against this are, you know, the pixel peepers, the guys that all they care about is, oh, you need a true 600mm f4, or you got to do it this way. That's the only way. Where this, to me, it's all about creating, leading the subject to the eyes. And, you know, if you're a viewer, right here in this image, what happens? Immediately your eyes go to the eyes of the deer. And so let's get in this. I'll show you how to do this. Let's get into Gimp. So we're using Gimp 2.0. And I'm going to delete this layer just to show you. So this is the original prairie chicken and the photo. And I'm going to delete this top layer because we're going to start on a new one. Boom. I'm going to duplicate this layer. It's always good to kind of create a couple different layers. That way you can see a before and after. So we got that. All right, let's start with the first one. To do this in Gimp, it's really pretty simple. You go to Filters, Blur, Focus Blur. Boom. And I'll explain how this tool works. This actually has a circle. And look at everything outside of this main circle is blurry. But if we look at that, it even goes further, because everything further out from the circle that was in focus is even blurrier. So it's got a radial look. The thing is, you can do so many things with this tool. Let's go right over the bird's eyes. That's where you want to make it the sharpest. And again, this is truly excessive. You can lessen this, you can lessen it up, but also you can widen this. You can grab this, grab these little circles and just make it wider, and we'll give it a rest, and then it will readjust. And then we can pull it down a little bit. Let's make it a little bit wider. And again, we can pull it down. Now it's still excessive, but you know, we talk about leading lines, we talk about dithering and shadows and sharpness. To me, you want the sharpest part of the photo, for the most part, to be the eyes, and then everything kind of leads up there. But let's say you don't have a subject that's on the same plane. There is the shape category with the focus blur that you can say horizontal. Now this is actually fits this animal subject pretty well. You have this mid-tier, this mid-level, that everything is in shape, everything is actually in focus, or I should say the middle band is in focus, then everything else slowly gets a little bit more blurrier, which is kind of how this photo would actually work out in reality. But if we bring this up just a little bit, and you can see it's just a little bit less, we can crop it down. A lot of times some of the birds and the animals, their feathers are a little bit blurred out as it goes further back. And let's hit the preview, see how much sharper it gets the whole photo, and then we hit, you know, click back on the preview and it gets a little bit more blurry. And let's enhance this just a little bit more. Grab one of these lines, bring it down, and you can actually enhance the amount of blur you want within this radius, within this area, with the blur radius. It's got a Gaussian blur, it's got all kinds of different types, you name it. You can put a high quality on there and you can click it on and off. Now this is pretty cool. Let's save this, and I'm going to actually raise up. That's what's so nice about this software. You can just do about anything. I'm going to punch up those shadows, and what I'm going to do is underneath the bird generally you get some shadows, and I kind of want a little more definition there. Yeah, and then I'll save that. Okay, all in all, when you get used to this, probably 1 minute to do this. And let's take a look at the original. Since we have layers, we can go back to the original, turn that off. Look at the blur in the foreground and the shadows, and then click it on. It's just a little subtle. It's a little subtle, but you can definitely tell a difference. And that's the thing with these small sensor cameras. You know, if you can kick it up a notch, you can really kind of play with some people's minds on that as far as what you photographed with it. And for the most part, they're not going to know. Definitely someone who doesn't photograph will have no clue. And even someone who is, to me, an expert, you can do so many things in Photoshop now, you can't tell the difference between what's reality and what's not. So yeah, anyway, guys, this is a great tool. Again, against kind of Photoshop, I'm not a big Photoshop guy who likes to pay $10, $20 a month. They play around with their prices. A subscription-based model kind of stopped them 15 years ago. And yeah, this GIMP is pretty cool stuff. If you guys are into this stuff, you know, comments, questions, concerns, and you know, hit that like, subscribe button. I will see you next week.